Skeptics interpret it as a powerful example of mass psychology under extreme expectation. Historians note the broader context of anti-clerical politics, rural devotion, and the trauma of global conflict. What happened at Fatima on October 13, 1917, sits at the intersection of astronomy, faith, journalism, and human perception. Tens of thousands gathered in the rain. Many left convinced they had seen the sun dance across the sky. Others left unconvinced, but unable to ignore the intensity of the moment. Today on strAInge, we will examine the earlier apparitions, the political climate of Portugal in 1917, the content of the so-called secrets of Fatima, and the ongoing debate over what exactly the crowd witnessed that October afternoon. Chapter 2. The apparitions begin. The event of October 13, 1917, did not emerge from nowhere. It was the culmination of a series of reported apparitions that began 5 months earlier, on May 13, 1917, in the fields outside Fátima, Portugal. At the center of the story were 3 children: Lucia dos Santos, born March 28, 1907, and her cousins Francisco Marto, born June 11, 1908, and Jacinta Marto, born March 11, 1910. They were shepherd children from deeply Catholic rural families in the parish of Aljustrel. On that May afternoon, while tending sheep at a place called the Cova da Iria, the children reported seeing a flash of light, followed by the appearance of a luminous female figure standing above a small holm oak tree. Lucia later described her as brighter than the sun and clothed in white, holding a rosary. The figure told them not to be afraid and said she had come from heaven. She asked them to return to the same place on the 13th of each month for 6 months. Word spread quickly through the surrounding villages. Initial reactions were mixed. Some neighbors dismissed the children's claims as imagination, others believed them immediately. The local parish priest expressed caution and advised careful discernment. Portugal at the time was under the First Republic, established in 1910 after the overthrow of the monarchy. The government had adopted strong anti-clerical policies, closing religious orders and restricting church influence. In this political climate, reports of Marian apparitions were not merely spiritual claims, but potential social flashpoints. On June 13, 1917, a small crowd accompanied the children to the site. Again, they reported seeing the luminous figure. Witnesses nearby claimed to hear a buzzing sound or notice a slight dimming of sunlight, though they did not see the figure themselves. The July 13th apparition became the most consequential. During that encounter, Lucia later stated that the figure revealed what would come to be known as the 3 secrets of Fatima. These included a vision of hell, a prediction of a second and worse war if people did not repent, and a request for the consecration of Russia. The July message also included a promise. In October, a great sign would be given so that all might believe. That promise transformed local curiosity into national attention. By August 13th, tensions escalated. The local administrator, Artur Santos, a secular official who opposed what he viewed as religious hysteria, detained the children for 2 days. He reportedly threatened them with imprisonment and worse if they did not retract their story. Despite pressure, the children maintained their account. The apparition scheduled for August 13th did not occur at the Cova da Iria, but Lucia later reported that it appeared on August 19th in a nearby field called Valinhos. Crowds continued to grow in September. On September 13th, thousands gathered. Many reported witnessing atmospheric effects, such as a falling of flower-like lights from the sky, though no physical petals were recovered. Newspaper reporters began attending. Among them were correspondents from O Século and O Dia, secular Lisbon papers that were not aligned with church interests. The story was no longer confined to rural devotion. It had entered the national press. Throughout these months, the children's descriptions remained broadly consistent. Lucia served as the primary spokesperson, as her cousins reportedly saw the figure but did not hear her speak. Francisco, according to Lucia's later memoirs, saw the apparition but heard nothing. Jacinta both saw and heard. These details were recorded years later, but became central to the narrative. By early October 1917, anticipation was intense. The promised sign was expected on October 13th at noon. Estimates suggest that tens of thousands prepared to travel to Fatima. Others came out of curiosity. Still others arrived intending to debunk the claim. The stage was set not only for a religious event, but for a public test. The children had predicted a visible sign. The political environment was skeptical. The press was watching. In the next chapter, we will return to October 13th itself and examine the testimony of those who stood in the rain that morning, waiting for the sky to change. Chapter 3. The Third Secret and the Spinning Sun. By the time October 13, 1917 arrived, anticipation had been building for months, fueled in part by what became known as the Third Secret of Fatima. The three secrets, according to Lucia dos Santos, were revealed during the July 13th apparition. The first was a vision of hell. The second warned of a future war worse than the First World War, and spoke of Russia spreading its errors throughout the world. The third was not immediately disclosed. Lucia would later write down the first two secrets in 1941 at the request of the Bishop of Iria. The third, however, she wrote separately in January 1944, sealed in an envelope, and entrusted to church authorities, with instructions that it not be opened until 1960, or after her death, whichever came first. The sealed text was eventually sent to Rome and held by the Vatican. For decades, its contents became the subject of intense speculation. In 1960, the Vatican announced that the secret would not yet be revealed, stating that it likely concerned matters of faith and was not necessary for public disclosure. This decision intensified curiosity. The Cold War was underway. The reference to Russia and the second secret took on new geopolitical meaning. Some speculated that the third secret predicted nuclear war, global apostasy, or even the end of the papacy. It was not until June 26, 2000, that the Vatican formally published the text of what it identified as the Third Secret. Under the authority of Pope John Paul II, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith released a vision describing a bishop dressed in white, climbing a mountain, passing through a devastated city filled with corpses, before being killed by soldiers along with other clergy and lay people. The Vatican interpreted the vision as symbolically referring to the 20th century persecution of Christians, and specifically to the assassination attempt on John Paul II, on May 13, 1981, the anniversary of the first apparition. Some believers accepted this interpretation. Others argued that the released text was incomplete, or that an additional explanatory document remained hidden. The debate over the third secret continues in certain Catholic circles, but the official position of the Church is that the full text has been disclosed. All of this, however, lies downstream of October 13, 1917. That morning, rain fell heavily over the Cova da Iria. By some estimates, between 30,000 and 70,000 people gathered in the field. Witnesses included peasants, urban skeptics, journalists, clergy, and curious onlookers. Among them was Avelino de Almeida, a reporter for O Século, who had previously written critically about the events. He later described the scene in detail. Around noon, according to numerous testimonies, the rain stopped. The clouds broke apart, and the sun appeared as a pale silvery disk that could be looked at directly without immediate discomfort. Multiple witnesses described it spinning rapidly, casting bands of red, blue, yellow, and violet light across the crowd. Some said it seemed to detach from the sky and plunge toward the earth in a zigzag motion before returning to its normal position. Panic reportedly spread as people feared the end of the world. Avelino de Almeida wrote on October 15, 1917, that the sun danced and performed movements never before observed. Another Lisbon paper, O Dia, carried similar descriptions. Importantly, these accounts came from journalists not aligned with the Church. Not all witnesses saw the same thing. Some described dramatic motion, others saw only a brightening of the sun. A portion of those present reported no unusual solar activity at all. Meteorological records show no astronomical anomaly recorded elsewhere in the world that day. Observatories did not note solar irregularities. One additional element frequently cited is the drying of clothing in ground. Many attendees reported that their rain-soaked garments and the muddy field dried rapidly after the solar display. Skeptics argue that a sudden break in clouds combined with wind could account for this effect. Believers consider it part of the miracle. From a scientific perspective, staring at the sun through thin cloud cover can produce retinal afterimages that appear to spin or vibrate. Collective expectation can shape interpretation, especially in emotionally charged settings. Yet the scale of the crowd and the number of independent reports make the event difficult to dismiss casually. The miracle of the sun remains one of the most widely reported mass religious phenomena. It exists at the intersection of testimony, journalism, theology, and human perception. The secrets, especially the third, extended influence for Fatima into global Catholic history. Chapter 4. The children and the aftermath. After October 13, 1917, the lives of the three shepherd children changed permanently. What had begun as private experiences in a rural field became an international religious phenomenon. Pilgrims continued traveling to Fatima even before the Catholic Church completed its formal investigation. The children were no longer anonymous villagers. They were witnesses to what many believed was a divine intervention during wartime Europe. Francisco Marto and Jacinta Marto, the younger cousins, did not live long after the apparitions. In 1918, the global influenza pandemic, often called the Spanish flu, swept across Europe. Francisco fell ill in October 1918 and died on April 4, 1919, at the age of 10. Jacinta contracted influenza shortly afterward. Her illness was prolonged and severe. She was transferred to hospitals in Vilanova de Ourém and later to Lisbon, where she underwent surgery in an attempt to drain infected fluid from her lungs. She died on February 20, 1920, at age 9. Both children reportedly expressed a belief that their suffering was part of a spiritual mission. Later devotional accounts emphasized their patience and willingness to endure illness as an offering. In 2000, under Pope John Paul II, Francisco and Jacinta were beatified at the sanctuary of Fatima. On May 13, 2017, the centenary of the first apparition, Pope Francis canonized them as saints, making them among the youngest non-martyr saints in Catholic history. Lucia dos Santos lived much longer and became the primary chronicler of the events. In 1921, she was sent to a school run by the Sisters of St. Dorothy in Vilar, near Porto, partly to remove her from constant public attention. In 1928, she entered the convent of the Dorothean Sisters in Pontevedra, Spain. Later, in 1948, she transferred to the Carmelite convent in Coimbra, where she took the name Sister Maria Lucia of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart. It was in the 1940s, at the request of the Bishop of Iria, that Lucia wrote her detailed memoirs. These documents recorded the apparitions, the secrets, and her recollections of conversations with the Virgin Mary. Historians note that these memoirs were written decades after the original events, raising questions about memory, development of narrative, and the influence of later theological context. Still, they remain the primary source for much of what is known about the content of the apparitions. The Catholic Church proceeded cautiously. On October 13, 1930, Bishop José Alves Correa de Silva of Leiria officially declared the apparitions worthy of belief. This declaration did not require Catholics to accept the events as fact, but it permitted public devotion. Over time, the site developed into the sanctuary of Fatima, drawing millions of pilgrims annually. The political implications of Fatima were significant. The reference to Russia in the Second Secret took on new meaning after the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution and during the rise of Soviet communism. In 1942, during World War II, Pope Pius XII consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, referencing the Fatima message. In 1984, Pope John Paul II performed a similar act of consecration, which some believers interpret as fulfilling the apparition's request regarding Russia. Sister Lucia died on February 13, 2005, at the age of 97. Her cause for beatification was opened in 2008. By the time of her death, Fatima had become one of the most influential Marian devotion sites in modern Catholicism, intertwined with 20th century politics, war, and papal history. The three children began as shepherds in a rural parish. 2 died before reaching adolescence. 1 lived into the 21st century, carrying a story that shaped global devotion. Their experiences, whether understood as supernatural events, visionary psychology, or something between, altered not only their own destinies, but also the spiritual landscape of millions. In the next chapter, we will examine scientific and skeptical interpretations of the miracle of the sun itself, exploring what atmospheric optics, neurology, and collective expectation might reveal about what happened in the sky over Fatima in 1917. Chapter 5. Optics, Atmosphere, and Expectation. The miracle of the sun on October 13, 1917, remains one of the most documented mass visionary events of the 20th century. Tens of thousands gathered. Multiple newspapers reported unusual solar behavior. Yet no astronomical observatory anywhere in the world recorded a disturbance in the sun's movement or luminosity that day. This absence forms the starting point for most scientific explanations. From an astronomical standpoint, the sun cannot physically dance or plunge toward the Earth without catastrophic global consequences. The Earth's orbital mechanics are stable and measurable. No tidal disruption, no seismic anomaly, and no atmospheric collapse occurred worldwide on October 13, 1917. Whatever happened at Fátima was local to perception. One widely cited explanation involves retinal afterimages. When a person stares at the sun, especially through thin cloud cover that reduces glare, the retina can become temporarily overstimulated. This overstimulation creates shifting patterns of light and color, often perceived as spinning, pulsing, or oscillating motion. Because the eye moves slightly even when attempting to focus, the afterimage can appear to dance. If many people in a crowd look upward simultaneously and describe similar patterns, suggestion can reinforce interpretation. Meteorological conditions also matter. Contemporary reports indicate that heavy rain preceded the event, followed by a sudden clearing of clouds around noon. Thin cloud layers, ice crystals, and shifting atmospheric moisture can create optical effects, such as parhelia, also called sundogs, or corona halos. These phenomena can distort the sun's apparent shape and brightness. Rapid breaks in cloud cover may produce the illusion of motion. The reported drying of clothing and ground has also been examined. Meteorologists note that strong sunlight combined with wind after rainfall can produce rapid evaporation, particularly if rain was lighter than perceived or localized. However, eyewitness descriptions often emphasize how soaked garments appeared dry within minutes, which remains one of the more puzzling aspects of the event. Psychological context is equally important. By October 1917, the crowd had been primed for a miracle. Lucia dos Santos had publicly promised a visible sign. Newspapers had reported on previous apparitions. Believers and skeptics alike arrived expecting something dramatic. In high expectation environments, perception can become highly suggestible. Studies in collective behavior show that ambiguous stimuli are often interpreted in line with prior belief, especially in emotionally charged gatherings. It is also significant that not everyone present saw the same phenomenon. Some described dramatic spinning and descent. Others saw only a brightening of the sun. Some reported no unusual movement at all. This variation supports the argument that the event involved perceptual differences rather than a uniform physical change in the sky. Still, skeptics must account for one detail: the consistency of certain descriptions across independent testimonies. Reports of the sun appearing as a silver disk, rotating rapidly, and emitting multicolored light appear in multiple accounts. Journalists such as Avelino de Almeida, who was not aligned with the church, described unusual solar motion in O Século. While he did not frame it explicitly as supernatural, he acknowledged that something remarkable had been perceived by thousands. The scientific explanations address mechanisms of vision and atmosphere, but they do not eliminate the social force of the event. For believers, the timing matters. The phenomenon occurred exactly when predicted, on October 13th, after months of reported apparitions. The perceived fulfillment of prophecy carries weight independent of optical physics. Modern researchers approach the miracle of the sun as a layered phenomenon. There is the physical sky, governed by astronomy. There is the human eye, governed by neurology. There is the crowd, governed by psychology and culture. The event at Fátima may sit at the intersection of all three. More than a century later, no consensus bridges faith and science on this point. For some, the explanation lies entirely in retinal overstimulation and atmospheric optics. For others, those mechanisms are insufficient to explain the scale and timing of the reports. The debate persists not because the physics are unknown, but because the meaning assigned to the event extends beyond physics. In the next chapter, we will examine how the miracle of the sun reshaped 20th century Catholic devotion, and why Fátima continues to draw millions of pilgrims each year, long after the clouds cleared over the Cova de Iria. Chapter 6: Pilgrimage, Politics, and a Global Shrine. In the years following October 13, 1917, the small rural field known as the Cova de Iria did not fade back into obscurity. Instead, it grew into one of the most significant Catholic pilgrimage destinations of the 20th century. What began with 3 shepherd children and a rain-soaked crowd developed into a shrine that now receives millions of visitors annually at the sanctuary of Fátima. After the local bishop declared the apparitions worthy of belief, on October 13, 1930, formal development accelerated. A chapel was constructed on the site of the original holm oak tree. Later, the Basilica of Our Lady of the Rosary was built, its construction beginning in 1928 and completed in 1953. The remains of Francisco Marto, Jacinta Marto, and eventually Lucia dos Santos were interred there, further cementing the location's spiritual centrality. The political implications of Fatima deepened during the 20th century. The second secret's reference to Russia and its errors took on new resonance after the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 and the rise of Soviet communism. During World War II, Pope Pius XII consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary in 1942, an act many linked directly to the Fatima message. Later, in 1984, Pope John Paul II performed a similar consecration ceremony in Rome. John Paul II's connection to Fatima was especially personal. On May 13, 1981, the anniversary of the first apparition, he was shot in St. Peter's Square by Mehmet Ali Agca. The Pope later credited Our Lady of Fatima with saving his life. One of the bullets removed during surgery was eventually placed in the crown of the Fatima statue. In 2000, when the Vatican released the text identified as the third secret, it interpreted the vision of a bishop dressed in white being attacked as symbolically fulfilled in the 1981 assassination attempt. Pilgrimage to Fatima expanded steadily throughout the late 20th century. Major papal visits in 1967, 1982, 1991, 2000, and 2017 reinforced its global status. The centenary celebration in 2017, attended by Pope Francis, drew hundreds of thousands. The scale of devotion transformed what had once been a quiet agricultural site into an immense open plaza capable of holding vast crowds. Beyond official church actions, Fatima became embedded in devotional life worldwide. The Rosary, already central to Catholic practice, gained renewed emphasis. Images of Our Lady of Fatima circulated globally, statues traveled in international tours, prayer movements invoked the message of repentance and peace associated with the apparitions. Yet, Fatima also remained controversial. Some Catholics argue that the consecration of Russia was not performed exactly as requested in the second secret. Others question whether the full meaning of the third secret has been disclosed. Meanwhile, skeptics continue to frame the miracle of the sun as an optical event amplified by expectation. What distinguishes Fatima from many other apparition sites is scale. The October 13th event was reported by secular newspapers. Tens of thousands claimed to witness something unusual. 2 of the 3 visionaries died shortly afterward during the influenza pandemic, which added a layer of tragic poignancy. The long life of Sister Lucia extended the story into the 21st century. Today, the sanctuary stands as both a spiritual center and a historical monument. Pilgrims walk the vast esplanade on their knees in acts of penance. Candles burn in massive racks. Masses are celebrated daily. The field where the rain once fell in 1917 has been paved, structured, and ritualized. Whether one views the miracle of the sun as divine intervention, atmospheric optics, or collective psychology, its impact is undeniable. It reshaped Marian devotion, influenced papal actions, and embedded itself in the political language of the Cold War era. The sky over Fatima may have returned to normal that October afternoon, but the event did not fade. It expanded outward, crossing borders and decades. In the final chapter, we will step back from theology and politics to ask a broader question. Why do mass visionary events like this endure? And what do they reveal about the intersection of belief, perception, and history? Chapter 7. Why the Sun Still Dances. More than a century after October 13, 1917, the miracle of the sun remains one of the most debated mass religious events in modern history. It sits at the intersection of testimony and optics, prophecy and psychology, journalism and devotion. Tens of thousands gathered in a muddy field outside Fatima. Many left convinced they had seen the sun spin, pulse with color, and plunge toward the earth. Others left puzzled. A smaller number reported nothing unusual at all. The durability of the event is striking. Many alleged miracles fade quickly, surviving only in local memory. Fatima did not fade. It expanded. The accounts were recorded in secular newspapers within days. The church investigated and in 1930 declared the apparitions worthy of belief. The site became the Sanctuary of Fatima, one of the largest pilgrimage destinations in the world. The so-called secrets tied the event to World War, Russia, papal assassination attempts, and Cold War politics. What gives an event like this staying power is not only what was seen, but how it was framed. The children, Lucia dos Santos, Francisco Marto, and Jacinta Marto, were rural, poor, and young. They had little to gain socially or financially. 2 died within 3 years of the events, during the influenza pandemic. The third entered religious life and lived quietly for decades. Their personal trajectories reinforced the perception of sincerity. At the same time, historians note the broader context. Portugal in 1917 was politically unstable and officially secular, with anti-clerical policies in place since the 1910 revolution. Europe was engulfed in World War I. Anxiety, loss, and uncertainty were widespread. In such conditions, prophetic language resonates. A promise of peace, repentance, and divine oversight carries emotional force. Scientific explanations for the solar phenomenon remain grounded in optics and neurology. Staring at the sun through shifting cloud layers can produce retinal distortion. Collective expectation can align interpretation. Atmospheric conditions can create visual effects. None of these mechanisms are exotic, they are well understood. Yet what science explains in mechanism, it does not necessarily address in meaning. For believers, the key element is timing. A public sign was promised months in advance. A large crowd gathered. Something unusual was perceived by many at the appointed hour. Whether that perception was shaped by optical physics or divine intervention depends on prior worldview. The raw event, the crowd, the sun breaking through clouds, the shock of shared reaction, remains historically anchored. Mass visionary events reveal something essential about human experience. They demonstrate how perception is not purely individual, but social. They show how narrative forms quickly around anomaly. They reveal how meaning can expand outward from a single afternoon to shape international devotion, political symbolism, and theological debate for generations. The miracle of the sun continues to function as a mirror. For some, it reflects faith affirmed in a time of war. For others, it reflects the power of suggestion and the limits of perception. For historians, it marks a pivotal moment when rural testimony intersected with modern media. For psychologists, it offers a case study in collective experience. What happened in the sky over Fátima on October 13, 1917, remains unresolved, not because the physical mechanisms are unknowable, but because the interpretation carries weight beyond physics. A sun may not have moved in space, but something moved in history. A field became a shrine. 3 children became saints. A local report became global devotion. That tension between sight and belief, between what the eye records and what the mind concludes, is precisely the territory we explore here. Next time on strAInge, we move from Marian apparitions to modern conspiracy cosmology as we examine the world of David Icke, reptilian bloodlines, hidden control systems, and the architecture of belief in a very different kind of miracle story.